Of course, lots of the headlines talking about how the Conservatives haven't taken breaking the triple lock on pensions off the table. I suppose my question would be, what's Labour's position on this?
Well, good morning. Yes, it's very clear for us. The government should uprate pensions and benefits by inflation, the figure that we use this month for that uprating is a standard way to do that. I think that's necessary because of the cost of living crisis, but it's also, of course, a very clear manifesto commitment from the Conservative Party. So I can't see, frankly, how they can break it. I'm not sure they really are going to be honest. I think that what you're seeing at the minute is the government, frankly, put up a new idea every day, testing the water a little bit. Honestly, when inflation's the way it is, when mortgages are going up, when business investment's going down, I think that's incredibly bad because it's putting more anxiety out there when, frankly, the job of the government right now should be putting some calm and stability in place. But, of course, they are themselves the cause of this crisis because of that mini budget 3 weeks ago.
How would you pay for that uprate in pensions and benefits, given that even taking all these U-turns into account, there's still a £30 billion, give or take, black hole in the public finances? That's why we're talking about spending cuts. So if you were to pursue that policy, how would you fund it?
I'm sorry, no, look, the only reason we're talking about spending cuts is that mini budget 3 weeks ago. And because we haven't had an OBR report, we haven't had a forecast, I honestly can't tell you what the black hole may or may not be. I've heard 70 billion, 50 billion. I think you've just said 30 billion. One of our motions in Parliament today is to get that information so we can make that decision. But if the Conservative Party is genuinely talking about spending cuts, breaking manifesto commitments because of the crisis it created with that mini budget, I think people, quite frankly, will be furious. And I think as your discussion was featuring, that would be the opposite of the agenda they were elected on in 2019. So if that is what they're going to do, we'll get the forecasts, we'll put the policies forward, but let's have a general election and let the public decide which way they want to go.
You can't possibly suggest, though, that the Labour Party won't be cutting spending, can you?
I can do, but I can only give you specific pledges once we've seen the actual state of the national finances. I mean, I do feel this incredible sense of anger that 3 weeks ago this wouldn't even have been a question mark. But the fact that the Conservative Party borrowed money to do unfunded tax cuts for well-off people, that's pushed the cost of borrowing for the government through the roof to record levels. It has resulted in a major depreciation of sterling. The fact that they are, I mean, if you think about previous sort of really notorious bits of incompetence, Black Wednesday, for instance, when the John Major government got into so much trouble, the fact was they were trying to tackle things like inflation. This was to deliver tax cuts for the well-off. And if they're going to try and return to austerity because of the damage they have caused, I cannot see how either they've got the mandate in Parliament for that or will have the consent of the British public to do that.
But, Jonathan, you do agree that, yes, there will be some discrepancy over the figures, but there will be a black hole for whoever forms the next government in the public finances that they will have to plug, and that there will either have to be spending cuts or tax rises or borrowing.
Well, clearly, no one can deny the impact of that mini budget has been severe. I mean, it's cost the Conservative Party another chance.
But it's not just about the mini budget, is it? We're talking about the context of all of the economics at the moment. We've been talking to expert after expert saying that, we're already facing economic problems before the mini budget.
But not of the context that we're talking about spending cuts. I mean, look, in the 3 trading days after that mini budget, the cost of government borrowing on 30-year gilts, that's a sort of benchmark we use, went up by an unprecedented amount. This crisis was created in Downing Street, and Liz Truss is solely responsible for it. And if she wants to pursue a completely different agenda to the one the Conservative Party was elected on, she's going to have to get a mandate for that. Now, the scale of the gap, and it is clearly, as you say, been severe, the damage that's been caused here, will be determined largely by the reaction to the announcements which we're getting from the government on a daily basis. But there's no serious way we can make any decisions until we've got hard data and information and forecasts. And that is why it was negligent. It wasn't just incompetent, it was negligent to do a budget without the usual checks and balances and institutional information and transparency that we would usually expect. Because we haven't got that, we're in problem after problem. So let's get that information out today, and then let's make some decisions when we know really, frankly, what we're talking about.
But I'm sorry to keep coming back to it. You are going to face the same problems that any government is going to face.
Well, first of all, the lack of confidence in the Conservative Party that's created the black hole, the cost of borrowing going up, will in some way be alleviated by getting rid of the Conservative Party, because you can't just get back confidence that you've lost so casually. So I do think the spending envelope would be better for Labour. There would be sources of revenue we've already identified, so we would abolish the non-dom rule. That brings in over £3 billion of revenue. We wouldn't treat private schools, like charities, that brings
These
in
are
revenue.
small
We
fries.
wouldn't tax
These are
private
small
equity in the same way.
savings.
So when we want to spend more money on day-to-day public services or address the black hole the Conservative Party have created, we have identified sources of revenue to do that. But fundamentally, the bit that Liz Truss was right about, the only thing she's been right about so far, is that the last 12 years of economic policy under the Conservative Party have resulted in relatively poor levels of growth. And that's why there's so much pressure on the public finances, even before this crisis that they created with the mini budget. So therefore, the plan for growth, the long-term plan, is what will be, I think, decided on at the election. And for us, that's about long-term business investment, industrial strategy, fixing business rates, making sure our trading relationship with the single market and the rest of Europe is better than the one the government created. That is absolutely essential. But the balance between growth, tax rises and spending cuts will be determined by, frankly, the reaction to what we've seen from the government so far.
You do seem to be struggling to use to accept that you will have to make public spending cuts. And, even your own leader, Sir Keir Starmer, saying over the weekend that if and when we do get into power, we will not be able to do good Labour things. What does he mean by that?
Well, I accept under no circumstances a return to the kind of austerity which has caused, frankly, a huge degree of problems in our public services and ultimately was, I would say, counterproductive. What Keir was saying when he said that is very clearly a recognition that if you look at so many different aspects of public life, whether it's the health service, schools, the criminal justice system, clearly there are massive pressures and we don't have a magic wand, we can't fix all these problems overnight. But what we can do is give people some hope for the future, that things can be better, that there'll be different decisions from government, there'll be better, longer term, more secure growth, more ambition on energy security and reaching net zero, and that there'll be hope to turn these problems around, rather than, frankly, a Conservative Party saying, you've had 12 years of pain, we're offering you some more pain now, and if we get re-elected, there'll be some more pain in the future. People want some hope that things can be better than this, and I think they're right to expect that.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying that Labour just needs to keep their mouth shut, let the government kind of get on with its business and kind of lurch from one, as some people perceive it, crisis to another, and that as long as you stay quiet and just talk about vague promises but not actually give any costed figures, that kind of thing, you'll be, and look at the polls, then come the next election, you'll be in power. Can you afford to be that complacent?
I completely disagree with your analysis there. I mean, first of all, if you see the massive collapse in support for the Conservative Party, it's not the case anymore that automatically transfers to a different political party. You've got to earn that support. If Keir Starmer hadn't changed the Labour Party, hadn't accepted that 2019 defeat and things needing to change, you wouldn't have seen that support. And specifically on anything we put forward, so in Labour Party conference, we had our plans for expansion of the health service and for things like GB Energy, so a state company investing and bringing in private sector investment into reaching our energy security goals. Look, every single pledge we've ever made on day-to-day spending has been costed, has been hypothecated to additional sources of revenue. So abolishing the non-dom rule, an example I've just given you, brings in £3.2 billion. That's what we would use to fund that expansion of the NHS workforce, where we said we'll do things like tax private equity more. We've linked that to the breakfast clubs we want to put in place to make sure everyone's getting a good start in life. So we simply don't believe, to be frank, in the Conservative Party's approach, which is you can borrow money for tax cuts and somehow this will magically pay for itself. We believe you can borrow money for a crisis, such as the energy crisis. You can borrow money to invest, but you can't borrow money for day-to-day spending. And if we hadn't, I think, had that strict approach to discipline, which some people criticised Keir Starmer for at one point, I think now they realise why that's so important. And we'll continue to do the changes we need rather than just let the Conservative Party fall apart.
OK, Jonathan Reynolds, Shadow Business Secretary, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Thank you.